Hello there, John Culturillo here, the life coach of your listener. Thank you for joining me for this episode. It seems that people love to ask questions of me. One of the most common questions I've been asked of a given variety is, John, why do you ask so many questions? What a coincidence. Another remark that's been made is that I don't smile much, and I'd like to start this episode with a whimsical anecdote that once in an educational context, somebody observed me conducting a mock counselling session with somebody else in which I was the counsellor, and their remark was, John, your facial expression doesn't change much, and as a result the client's likely to think that you're not listening to them or not interpreting what they're saying. Now, if I wanted to play an identity politics game, I could say that's ableist because I'm actually autistic, and my autism is actually relevant to why I don't smile, which is something I'm going to discuss later in this episode. But it would be disingenuous and would make a mockery of autistic people because regardless of whether someone is autistic or not, the judgment is invalid, and I'm going to explain why. And I'm also going to preface this by saying that in the real world, this has never been an issue. It has not caused a problem between me and anyone else in a professional environment. First of all, on my podcast and when I'm working with a client, we're often discussing some quite serious topics. So at times it may be appropriate to smile, but smiling at all times is completely disingenuous, and I've seen this mistake be made. This idea seems to have become popularized because we want to promote false positivity. We feel uncomfortable with the idea of serious or sometimes uncomfortable topics, so we want to try to soften the blow, so to speak, by introducing some positivity. But again, if your client is talking to you about a serious topic and you're smiling, it's going to seem forced. I've seen it happen before. I've been a client of helping professionals in which they have been smiling to me at all times, and I'm sitting in the client's chair thinking to myself, this is what university taught you, but it's not how it works in the real world. Sometimes part of honouring what the client's telling you is being serious to reflect that you recognise that what they're telling you is serious. Also, something relevant to autism, which is something I was discussing with an autistic occupational therapist at one stage, was often a serious or a blank face from an autistic person is actually a sign that they're listening very carefully to what you're saying and processing it. And it's that it can cause something of an overwhelm if they're trying to force themselves to put on a smile or any other facial expression that doesn't naturally come to them, and also spend all the cognitive effort necessary to properly process what you're saying. And I've worked with people before who might be autistic or have ADHD, and sometimes they might be looking away from me at times, or they might be fidgeting with their hands, or they might not always be looking at me. But I'll always know when they're listening to me because their responses indicate that they're listening to me. And my clients know when I'm listening to them because my responses indicate to them that I have very deeply processed what they've said. People interpret information in context. They don't simply look at someone and think, that person looked away for a brief second, therefore they're not listening. That person's fidgeting, therefore they're not listening. That person isn't always smiling, therefore they're not listening. The human brain makes far more numerous and complex connections between concepts than that idea suggests. We don't simply take one cue in these types of contexts and then make an entire conclusion based on that. It's technically possible, but in the context of a helping relationship, if you are conducting yourself professionally in a way that otherwise genuinely demonstrates that you are listening to and properly processing what that client is saying, the client will know it. It's about making sure that you have a strong theory of mind and you can understand how other people are going to interpret how you communicate. And this is something that often can't be taught in a textbook. Universities have probably tried for a long time, but in reality, it can help. Education helps. Nothing can beat proper experience and having the intuition and the theory of mind, that is to say, the ability to understand the human condition in allowing you to communicate effectively with people. You need to have an innate sense of it, and sometimes that's something that is too complex to actually teach somebody. But these ideas about forcing a smile or forcing certain facial expressions are not in the spirit of the helping profession, even though a lot of courses and educational contexts will preach that you have to have certain facial expressions and you have to smile all the time. It's just not true, because I've seen plenty of helping professions follow every trick in the book and still cause significant harm because they don't understand the proper human condition. They're only working off book learning. They're only working off theoretical knowledge, not practical innate sense that they have embodied through experience. So thank you for joining me for this episode. As per usual, Please seek professional advice if anything that I've discussed today has caused concern. Please do not ever take what you see on the internet as advice. And I love to hear from my audience. If you have an idea that you'd like to hear discussed or you have a question for me, please feel free to contact me. I'm always happy to communicate. Until next time, take care.